Tuesday, July 9th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So this is the second video of the day for me, unusual, but I have an important subject I like to cover, and that's whether sovereign countries or sovereign central banks from other countries can really trust the Bank of England to hold on to their physical gold at the City of London in the Bank of England vaults. I think that's for you to decide. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of when the Bank of England actually didn't act in the best interest of their clients or other sovereign countries or sovereign central banks. And why is that subject come up? Why do I think it's important right now? Well, I tweeted a story out from Zero Hedge this morning. After I did my video this morning, I saw that there was a story about how Poland has joined Hungary with huge gold purchases and repatriation. And I tweeted that out. Someone replied, how can countries or how can people still trust the Bank of England with their gold? And that's why I decided to do this video. I'm going to look at history, recent history, and also history from just before World War II of how the Bank of England has acted in the past and how people could expect the Bank of England to act, and why, in my opinion, if I was running a foreign central bank or if I was running a Ministry of Finance that was in charge of safekeeping a country's gold, I would not keep that gold at the Bank of England. So what does the story about Poland say? Well, I'll read through that story, and then I'll go through the examples of when the Bank of England basically screwed other countries. So this is from bullionstar.com on Zero Hedge, and it was submitted by Ronan Manley. So, with a variety of the world's central banks going on a gold buying spree in recent years, such as Russia and China, there has unsurprisingly been no shortage of news flow in this area for the world's financial media to comment on. But even in such an environment of abundant sovereign gold purchases, a number of buying bombshells have stood out for their intensity and shock and awe abruptness, particularly from nations which on the surface might seem like unlikely gold buyers. So he goes on to talk about Hungary, how they actually increased their reserves. I think it was last year, tenfold, from 3.1 tons to 31.5 tons, and how they repatriated all of it from London to Budapest. So they took it away from the Bank of England. I think they've done their homework in Budapest. Is it any wonder that the Hungarian government is been ostracized by London and the West in general? And then he goes on to say, and I quote, with almost all of Poland's gold held at the Bank of England, a relevant question now is how long before Poland also sees fit to repatriate its gold in physical form away from the fractionally backed LBMA-controlled gold trading center of London. Yeah, and that's why the, how can I say, the Bank of England doesn't want to see other sovereign countries take their gold away. Like Australia is keeping their 80 tons with the Bank of England. John Adams has spoken about this many times. But the Reserve Bank of Australia is playing the game. They're leaving their physical gold all the way across the the globe at the Bank of England. Why isn't it in Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra, the Australian gold, right? So he goes on to say the answer to this question was not long at all. For the Hungarian bombshell, we can now add Hungary's neighbor and closest political ally, Poland, which has just in its own way shocked the gold market and the European Union by announcing that during the first half of 2019, it has already bought 100 tons of monetary gold at the Bank of England, bringing its gold reserves to 228.6 tons, all stored at the Bank of England, and now plans to repatriate almost half of its strategic gold reserves, or at least 100 tons, back to the National Bank of Poland vaults in Warsaw. I would say they should repatriate all of it. I wouldn't trust the Bank of England personally with my gold reserves. Anyway, the first example is not ancient history. It's just this year. Maduro stymied in bid to pull $1.2 billion of gold from the UK. So this was from January, when there was a movement to try to bring down the Maduro regime. We had this phony coup in Venezuela. Some guy there declared that he was president, and he's failed, but the Bank of England held on to Venezuela's gold. So there's an example. You can't really trust the Bank of England. It became totally political there. But the more nefarious example is the one from just before World War II in 1938. And it's documented in this book here, The Tower of Basel, by Adam Libor. What is the Tower of Basel? Well, it's the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which is a supranational bank above the law. It's like, how can I say, a sovereign country within Switzerland. And it's the bank for the central banks of the world. And the major central bankers from around the world meet there every 2 months. They go there and meet in secret. Everything is in secret. They do have a website and publish stuff, but the important stuff is kept secret. And they even have diplomatic passports when they're traveling to the BIS. That is Jay Powell, that's Mario Draghi, Mark Carney, Kuroda in Japan, and all the other major central bankers. And I have an interesting story. When I was selling my house back in 2015, the house that I sold prior to this house, to moving to the house that I'm in, one of the viewers was actually someone who worked for the Bank of England. And this person had been on what's called secondment to the BIS. So for a few years. So he worked at the BIS on secondment from the Bank of England. So what does that mean? It just means the temporary transfer of an official or worker to another position or employment. So that's how the BIS is. They've got loads of officials from other central banks going to work there on secondment, and they're actually paid by their home central bank, not the BIS. So, and why is this important? Well, because you will see how the BIS and the Bank of England have been working together for decades. And yes, this was in 1938, before the Bank of England was nationalized in 1946. But personally, I don't think leopards changed their spots. That's for you to decide whether you trust the Bank of England. So this is the part of the book where the chapter 5 is called an unauthorized plunder. So I'll go through parts of this chapter, and you'll see what the Bank of England did back in 1938. So it starts with a quote from a Labour MP speaking to the House of Commons, George Strauss, in May 1939. And the quote is, "The Bank for International Settlements is the bank which sanctions the most notorious outrage of this generation, the rape of Czechoslovakia." But it's not just the BIS that was involved in this. So let's go through this. So I'm quoting from the book now. "When Nazi Germany annexed the Czechoslovak border province of the Sudetenland in September 1938, it immediately absorbed a good part of the country's banking system, as well as most of Czechoslovakia's strategic defenses. By then, the country's national bank had prudently, they thought, they thought is my addition to this, transferred most of its gold abroad to two accounts at the Bank of England, one in the name of the BIS and one in the name of the National Bank of Czechoslovakia itself. Countries had deposited some of their gold reserves in a sub-account at the BIS account in London to ease gold sales and purchases. Of the 94,772 kilograms of gold, or about 95 tons, only 6.3 tons remained in Prague. The security of the national gold was more than a monetary issue. The Czechoslovak reserves, like those of Republican Spain, were an expression of nationhood. Carved out of the remains of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918, the Czechoslovak Republic was a new and fragile nation. A good part of the gold had been donated by the public in the country's early years. Joseph Malik, the governor of the National Bank, and his fellow Czechs believed that even as the Nazis dismembered their homeland, if the national gold was safe, then something of the country's independence would endure. They were wrong. The Czechoslovaks' faith in the probity of the BIS and the Bank of England was tragically misplaced. The gold was sacrificed with barely a second thought to the needs of transnational finance and the Third Reich. The Nazis' first demand came in February 1939 when Berlin ordered Prague to transfer just over 14.5 metric tons of gold, supposedly back to the German currency, now circulating in the Sudetenland. This was certainly an innovative idea. First, invade a neighboring country, annex part of it, and then demand that the newly truncated state supply the gold to pay for the loss of its territory. The following month, the question became academic. On March 15th, the Wehrmacht marched into Prague. The German protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia was declared, and Czechoslovakia no longer existed. But the gold reserves did. 3 days later, a Reichsbank official was dispatched to the National Bank of Czechoslovakia and ordered the directors, under the threat of death, to issue two orders. Thanks to diligent detective work by Pete Clements, the BIS archivist, we have a clear picture of what happened next. The first order instructed the BIS to transfer 23.1 metric tons of Czechoslovak gold held at the BIS account at the Bank of England to the Reichsbank BIS account, also held at the Bank of England. The second order instructed the Bank of England to transfer almost 27 metric tons of gold held in the National Bank of Czechoslovakia's own account to the BIS's gold account at the Bank of England. Malik and his fellow directors hoped that it would be obvious that the instructions had been under duress and so would not be implemented. The Nazis had just invaded Czechoslovakia and would obviously target the national gold reserves, but Malik had not reckoned on Montague Norman. Well, that was the governor of the Bank of England. He was governor for over 20 years, I think. The governor of the Bank of England had no interest in whether Czechoslovakia was free or a Nazi colony. Political considerations must not affect the BIS's transaction. The transfer order, he said, must go through. So there you go. So should Poland really leave any gold at all with the Bank of England? I don't think so. They should take all their 200 tons plus out of the Bank of England. Australia as well should do the same, but it looks like the officials at the Reserve Bank of Australia are pawns of the bankers in London. Is it Mr. Lowe? He's the chairman of the Reserve Bank of Australia. He's not interested in having an independent audit at the Bank of England. He's actually allowing the Bank of England itself to do the audit, which seems really doesn't seem like an audit to me. So no, I wouldn't trust the old lady of Threadneedle Street with my gold. But I think one of the main reasons they keep their gold there is to keep this fiat money scheme going. It allows the bullion banks in London to use that gold through the LBMA to leverage it and to lease it out to keep the gold price under control or suppressed. But beware, you might be getting a little bit of revenue lease on that gold, but you never know when the Bank of England will actually basically confiscate your gold. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and you can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye.